All right, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to just share some of this story with y'all. Thank you, Christine and Micah. Those were great stories. And we're going to share a little bit about the experience that I've had and the experience that my teams have had innovating in such a large organization. So 30 dead startups. First, before I get into that, a little bit about me. I had 10 years in startups before coming to Indeed, both here in Austin as well as in New York. And after a few years of that, I joined to run the labs team here at Indeed. And that team was about 4 engineers when I joined. We've grown that team now. It's 50 engineers. I'm going to talk about kind of some of the things that we've tackled. But to give you a little bit of a picture first, I'd like to explain a little bit about how our incubator is structured, because we've moved from a traditional labs style team into an incubator, and that was an intentional name change because we really wanted to move away from kind of internal innovation and new product innovation to just focus on new product innovation, new customer-facing products. We modeled our program after the venture capital system, where anyone in the company is able to pitch an idea and try that idea out against our investment committee, which is comprised of our senior leadership team. That senior leadership team then gives a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but if they get that thumbs up, they get to move into the incubator. Their role is protected. They'll get a chance to go back to that after being the founder of this new startup within Indeed. They move in, and we build and grow that product over successful rounds of funding, and eventually, hopefully, exit it out into the rest of the business and produce new value adds to Indeed as a whole. So I want to walk through a couple of examples because that still sounds kind of generic and boring. So I'm picking one example. We have 13 teams running concurrently right now. The first example is a team, and actually you can tell, a team based in Tokyo, and they are building a product called Universal Resume. A Universal Resume is specifically targeted at the Japanese market, helping folks in Japan who have to produce a resume to take to an employer. And that's very different than how it works here in the US. Here in the US, I make a Word doc or a Google doc of my resume, I print a couple copies of that, and I ship that around, or I make a PDF of that and I email it to some recruiters or whoever, and they've got it and we're good to go. In Japan, traditionally, first of all, the resume is turned, it's horizontal, it's a lot of little bitty boxes, and it's traditionally filled in by hand. And if any of your writing goes outside of one of those little boxes, you throw that one away and start over on a brand new sheet of paper. It's really tricky to do. There's a lot of information, and you've got to fit as much in there as possible to present yourself well to each employer, and you've got to make multiple copies, handwritten, of this to deliver to each employer, and they don't give it back, so you got to make another one the next time you want to go and interview somewhere. So it's a lot of work. So our team, one of our teams in Japan, built this product to allow people to fill in a Google form, or a web form, and capture that information, and then present it back to them in a PDF, and it's all formatted, and they can see that everything fits within the boxes. It actually allows them to bring their own image, because your photo is attached to your resume, which is a fun trick. And then they can print that. They can actually, strangely enough, they can actually print it at 7-Eleven. It's a very Tokyo thing to go and print at 7-Eleven. But yeah, so that helps them get their resume in a format and have a copy of that they can very quickly and easily use as they go from one employer to another as they're applying for jobs. A second example product that we built is one we call Indeed Start. This is in our social impact hiring space. So this is our teams that are focused on helping job seekers with some sort of disadvantage. Maybe they have had, in this case, a brush with the incarceration system. So in this case, we're working with youth and not-for-profits that help youth who've been incarcerated to get their first full-time employment. Because the truth is that if they don't get a really solid first-time employment, they're likely to be unemployed or underemployed for most of the rest of their career. And so by helping them to enter the labor force, we're helping them, obviously, to have a successful life, dramatically reducing the recidivism rate. We're also obviously helping the overall marketplace as a whole, which of course benefits Indeed. And this is a product that we're doing just to give back, and we're super excited about it. It's a challenging space. There's a lot of nuances to it. We've developed some partnerships with Goodwill and others that are helping us to move this along. But this is a product that our team has been building. And then third, here in Austin, that was a team in Seattle, by the way. Here in Austin, we have been working on a product called Hiring Events. This was actually our beta product. We got wind that a product manager in San Francisco was toying with this idea, had a spreadsheet implementation of it, and we said, can we pitch that? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So we pitched it, and the executive said, yeah, let's see what you can do with this. And a hiring event is a concept that a company like Amazon or a company like Dell or others would do a hiring event on their campus, or maybe they rent a ballroom and have people come to that event, interview, and often get a job on site at that event. Traditionally, managing those events on Indeed's platform wasn't easy. Our platform is built for managing individual jobs. And so if you're hiring 10 different roles across a couple of different locations, you had 10 times 3, 10 times 10 jobs to individually post and manage the spend for each of those individually on the existing platform. With hiring events, we simplified that and said, tell us about the event. Tell us the types of jobs you're going to have there. Tell us the locations that's going to be at, and we will help you publish all of those jobs onto the platform, and we'll help you manage the spend for this, because actually it turns out that some research we did as we built this product was that the way that Indeed traditionally works was very different than the way you needed to spend money to get the right people to come to your hiring event. Traditionally, a lot of your best applicants come in the first few days of your job going live on Indeed, whereas with a hiring event, if that job goes live more than 7 days before the hiring event, most of those applicants will not come to your hiring event. They're going to the hiring event next weekend, or the weekend before, and likely getting a job there, and then they decide not to come to your hiring event. So we needed to change the model. We needed to change the way that we were doing the spending to make sure we were getting the right people in the door to be successful. This has been a really successful product. We ran this for 2.5 years. We just exited this to our enterprise business. It's now bringing in a ton of revenue and helping an absolute ton of job seekers get connected into jobs in a space that really Indeed wasn't as successful as we wanted to be. So super exciting success there. So, when I talk about our program, I often, as I'm talking with engineers and trying to explain it to them, I've always used this tool belt analogy as we were building software. I was a manager for a number of years, and I would use this tool belt analogy, and I would talk about, building software is like building a house. You've got your hash map, that's your hammer, and you've got your linked list, that's your saw. And you know what a design pattern is? It's just like coding. It's just the codes for like how many inches between center on studs. And actually, we build walls like this, and then we stand them up. It's a way we do it because it makes it easy, it makes it reliable, it makes it consistent. Okay, this analogy mostly worked, but I think there's a way for us to talk about innovating on that. I'm going to go through our program and talk a little bit about the program as a whole, and then we'll come back to this analogy a little bit more. So, our program is comprised of a couple of key components. The first is metered funding. So metered funding is this concept of only giving teams a little bit of runway and a little bit of funding. So in our case, the first round of funding is typically $150,000 of discretionary spending, of spending for their budget. A chunk of that goes to salaries, leaving them about $60K of discretionary spending that they can spend on additional engineers, tools to make their product go faster, or search engine marketing to help bring customers to their product. And so they have a lot of flexibility as to how they spend that. This gives us a ton of benefits that I can speak to later. But first, I want to talk about the fact that they now have 3 months and $150,000. What are they going to do with that? So they build their MVP, typically shipping that within about 3 to 4 weeks, and begin to measure and adjust and learn and see what's working and see what's resonating in the market, see which advertising keywords are working. At the end of that 3 months, they have to come back to our investment committee, and they have to talk about what's worked, what they are going to do next, and what they've already learned. At that point, there are 3 outcomes. The first outcome is the investment committee says, thank you very much. We're glad for what we've learned here. This market isn't as big as we thought. This market's much harder to get into than we thought, and this product isn't going to get us in there today. Or it just doesn't show the trajectory for success that says we should keep going on this project. So they will ask them to shut down. For our teams, that's not a negative. The founder will move back into their old role. Our engineers will move on to another project and get started on something else in rapid fashion. We'll shut this down and move on. Now, the second option is continuation. It's going okay, but it's not going great. It's going well enough, and I like to make this kind of akin to a venture capitalist giving you a bridge round. Your current investors like what you're doing. They think you can get this to another larger round of investment, but you're not there yet. So we'll give you a small amount more money. Maybe it's a loan, maybe it's an extension of additional credit, some other way of giving you funding to keep the project alive, but it doesn't have a ton more runway than what you had before. So in this case, our teams, if they had 3 months of funding, would get another 3 months of funding, another $150K, and keep exploring the idea. This happens for a couple of reasons. One, sometimes the big test, we were building all quarter for this big test that's going to tell us whether or not this is going to work, and it goes live just before the end of the quarter, and we don't have enough data back to say yes or no on that test. The other thing that happens is sometimes you learn something right at the end of the quarter, and you say, if we pivoted from this niche to this other one, we could be successful. Now, one option is we could say shut it down, and eventually later we'll just pitch that new idea. But there's a startup cost to that, and it's actually like keeping this running and going ahead and testing that is sometimes a good idea. And so sometimes our investment committee will say, you know what, let's explore that additional idea. We know it's a pivot from your original idea, but let's explore it. We'll give you another 3 months to explore that other idea. Teams don't like to be in this mode because you make a lot of short-term decisions when you only have 1 quarter to live, but we can explore a lot of ideas in pretty rapid fashion. And finally, this is the outcome we always want, but don't always get, which is the double down. Things are going great, good success, you're learning a ton, the market seems large, so the investment committee says, we're gonna double down. And actually, this is fun, they double down on time, but they actually triple down on money. The fun thing of this is that by giving them additional funds, more than just the investment level they were at, it gives them more flexibility. If they need to increase their marketing spend, if they need to bring on more engineers or a second product manager, or research, get part-time from a data scientist or others to help them be successful, they now have more flexibility to do that. And so, when you sit down and you look at this, this is what it looks like. The double down on time goes from 3 to 6 to then 12 months of funding before they have to come back to that investment committee. And their funds go from 150, we round and just say $500,000 for the next round, and then $500,000 goes to 1.5 million, which gives them the opportunity to have a good-sized team and try some really big, audacious things, because they've got 12 months of runway and quite a bit more funding. Now, the truth is that the other thing that all of this does is constraint breeds innovation. So by having a short period of time and a short runway, you've got to think fast. You've got to think, what's the fastest way we can explore this idea in order to move this forward? And there are 3 things that are kind of unique about being constrained like this. The first is it keeps you thinking small. It keeps you thinking about what can we do in this quarter, and if we get funding, maybe the next quarter. We're not thinking about 2-year, 5-year, 10-year roadmaps. We're thinking, how do we know that this will have 2 years or 5 years or 10 years of life? What's going to tell us that? Things like the size of the market are going to tell us that. How can we learn what the size of this market is? Things like customer interest, whether it's the job seeker or the employer, those are going to tell us whether or not this is going to have a long life. And so how can we know what our adoption rate is? So we'll keep things small and move very quickly on that. The second thing is we'll move quickly. Obviously, there are times when you can take some corners, cut some corners, and move quickly from a software side. But there are other things that we'll do that help us to save time. So one of my favorite examples of a team moving quick was a team that needed to take an individual job that they were going to display to a job seeker, and we thought, what if we had a component? And it's comment on the rest of Indeed that said, these are other jobs you might be interested in. What if we could get them to apply to not 1 job, but 2 or 3 jobs while they're here? Maybe that second or third job is actually going to be the right fit for them. And so we said, okay, let's see. To do that, we're going to need a data model that can tell the difference between a nursing job and a trucking job and a retail job. And wow, that model's going to be tricky, and we don't have that much data, and we definitely don't have that much traffic yet. What can we do that will solve this problem quickly? And we got to looking at the data, and we began to notice a pattern, which was that when you looked at the recruiter's ID in the table of who got that job onto the platform, all the nursing jobs had the same recruiter. and all the trucking jobs had the same recruiter. And it turned out that behind the scenes, the people who were bringing the jobs onto the platform only brought in one particular vertical. That's the vertical that they worked in. And we said, here's a simple heuristic for doing relevant jobs. If you're looking for a director of nursing job, then these other nursing jobs will be relevant to you. And I can just go and get other jobs that this recruiter brought onto the platform, or trucking jobs, the same thing. So we were able to cut a corner there. That won't work forever, but it worked long enough to let us build that box and explore it and say, does this work? Are people coming for just the one job, or are they willing to look at some secondary and tertiary jobs and move on through the experience? The third thing that this constraint builds for us is that it keeps us from overbuilding. We don't overthink. You don't expect that this code is going to last that long. You expect, honestly, I used to say you expect that the code's going to go in the trash. The truth is, A, we're not printing the code. It's just not happening. And B, we're not deleting these repositories, we archive them. And so actually these projects get archived, and we actually still reuse a lot of that code just in we did this before. Here's an example of how we've done this before, rather than trying to think, okay, how do I build this email library to be reusable? How do I build this splash page component to be reusable? And we have a pattern of reuse that's a little different than some other teams, but we've been able to help teams keep things simple so that they can move quickly. So the second thing about our team, beyond the metered funding, is the fact that we run a very cross-functional team. Christine talked about her program and her engineers and QAs and product all working very, very closely together, and we have that exact same model. We added a number of other people to our incubator in order to take that cross-functional nature of the team up several notches. So we added marketing, sales, user experience, and legal to the team, all dedicated to that individual product idea in order to make sure that if there's a roadblock on the legal side, we've got somebody who can help drive that through to completion, can help speak the startup language to the lawyers and say, this is what we're trying to do. Can you help us get to a place where we can test this in small scale with kind of kid gloves on the product? We've got sales and marketing on the team, not only talking about the sales and marketing side, but really thinking about the product and giving their input into where the product should go, what the product should do, based on this feedback that we've seen in our platform. This is something we think that the customers need in this product. And UX, of course, is instrumental in giving us tons of experience feedback, but also often by having these number of diverse voices and opinions on the team, we get really good product ideas because our team members put themselves in the shoes of the user and really think about how a user would utilize this product and then give that feedback to the team. The last thing I'll talk about with regard to, actually it's not the last thing, but it's the next to last thing. But the next thing I'll talk about with regard to tools that we've used as a program to make ourselves successful is what we call innovation economics. Now I'm going to be completely honest, we stole this terminology from Eric Ries. Eric Ries wrote The Lean Startup, and then he wrote a book called The Startup Way. That book, The Startup Way, came out in late 2017. We started this in April 2017, so we didn't read the book and then build the program, but if you want to build the program, read the book, because it really lays out a lot of these principles and a lot of the ways that he was successful doing this in GE, GM, the United States Digital Service, and a number of other very large organizations, being able to build a team that could be innovative even when there's a core business that has to be protected. But for us, innovation economics really relies on the fact that we're talking about kind of some of that metered funding. How much funding have we given this project? How much money are we dedicating to it in total? And what does that look like against the opportunity cost of something else? It gives a level playing field to all of the ideas that we're exploring because they all get that same type of opportunity for funding. It also allows us to track our overall spend in particular buckets. We have buckets like, this is how much we've invested in trying to improve the job seeker experience. This is how much we've invested in trying to build products for small and medium-sized businesses and so on. So we can have a portfolio mentality for our overall budget. So we know that we're putting money into a number of different ways that we could be successful and deliver a lot of benefit for Indeed. And then scaffolding. the scaffolding that we use Python and Django from a technology stack. We do that intentionally. A good portion of Indeed is built on Java for the scale and the flexibility that Java brings, and I was a Java developer for a number of years. Our team uses Python and Django for all of our applications, and that consistency gets us a couple of really key benefits. The first is it makes us really fast. Because we're using the same thing again and again, and our applications are not bespoke, but they're kind of consistent. We can do it very quickly because we've done it a couple of times before. It makes it easy to trade engineers into teams. As things shut down, we can move engineers into another team, and the application that they're working on looks almost identical to the application they just left. And so our teams can kind of expand and contract fairly organically, very easily, and very quickly. And it allows us to get benefit from what one team does very rapidly across all of our teams. And so the quintessential example that I go to is one that I'm really proud of. When we had to implement the GDPR and the CCPA regulations for privacy, we needed a way to find private information in our systems, as well as delete that private information, return it or delete that private information in our systems. We built one small library that each application was able to drop in and then just go into their models and decorate and say, this is an address, this is a phone number, this is PII, personally identifiable information. And in doing so, they could very quickly take care of the only thing they had to do, which was code their models, code their data to say what was PII. And they didn't have to think about, okay, what are the API endpoints? How often does that get called? By what systems? How do I know if it's working correctly or not? How do I have monitors and alerting and all of the other pieces that need to happen to make sure that we're meeting the expectations that we as a company have to meet around those? So we built that with one team and rolled that out across all 13 teams we had at the time, and then many teams since then have all gotten that basically from free day one. So they don't really have to think about anything more than what is PII, which makes it really easy. So I like to talk about this like it's Legos, but they're like really powerful Legos that let us really quickly snap together what this product should look like and test it. Like I mentioned, that typically our MVPs are getting into production, into customers' hands in 3 or maybe 4 weeks. So 30, actually, I think it's 34 now. I gave this talk back at the beginning of the quarter somewhere else, and this number is old, but 34 startups down and a bunch to go. The truth is that actually, so we've failed. I usually don't say failed. We have learned a ton at 30, 36, 34 startups. And we've shut a lot of them down, but the truth is we've actually exited 6 different things into our core business. I talked about hiring events and the opportunity that it's brought in. It's brought in a bunch of revenue. It's brought in a bunch of new job seekers and employers that weren't working with Indeed before. That's one way we've influenced the organization. A second is we've become a resource to a number of teams who come to us and say, how can I do some of what you're doing? Can I borrow the concept of metered funding? Or how does your cross-functional team work? Or what do you do for code reviews? And how do you maintain code quality at a reasonable level relative to your speed? And then, like I said, we've had other acquisitions, some of which have just been for data and users. And so we've influenced the business through a number of different acquisitions of projects that have gone out from the incubator. So if I were to go back now to that tool belt analogy and think like, okay, what are those pieces? Which one of those is the saw and the hammer? And the truth is, like, I had wood shop, but I don't think most people took wood shop in middle school and high school. I was thinking about this and I was like, well, probably nobody in here has raised a barn. And I got to thinking about that and I realized, actually, I may have accidentally raised a barn in high school. And by accidentally raised a barn, my dad came to me and he said, let's build a shed. We have a shed, but it's about at a 30-degree angle. It's time to replace it. Okay. So we start building a shed. When we finished building this shed, which was quite a while later, most of my summer, I think you could have parked 4 cars in the bottom floor of the shed. Yes, I said bottom floor of the shed. It had a second story as well. Pitched roof, looked just like a barn. We never called it a barn. It was a barn. So this analogy works for me because I did grow up doing some of that. I don't do a lot of it anymore. And ultimately, it just doesn't feel that innovative. It doesn't feel that like cutting edge, edgy, just really in your face. And I was thinking, where can we innovate on the tool belt? What analogy can I use that like the engineers are really gonna get, they're gonna get excited about, that really resonates with the audience? I was thinking, who has tons of money and is invested in their tool belt? Oh wait, I know who's done this. This guy's got, billions of dollars invested in all the cool gadgets. He's got the smoke bombs, and he's got the batarangs, and he's got the grappling hook. Heck, he's got the shark repellent if you look around in the literature, right? So he's got everything he needs on that tool belt, and he's got the cool stuff. So it's like, okay, all right, so from here on out, we're just working in bat mode, which for the parents who've seen the Lego Batman movie, means all the slides are black or very, very dark gray. So I like to be really open and honest about the mistakes that we've made. The truth is that that's just the way we operate, because ultimately mistakes are a way for us to learn. They're a chance for us to pick up new knowledge and not make those same mistakes again. And so, over the course of all of those things, we've learned a number of things. So let's start with the mistakes. The first is, there have been times when we've hired the wrong person. This is not Batman, this is Superman, for those who are unfamiliar. And, okay, sure, Superman and Batman don't always get along, but the truth is they're very different superheroes. This guy gets all of his powers from the sun, and he can do everything. He's got super speed and super breath and super eyes and super fingernails, who knows? Like, he's got everything just by virtue of standing in some sunlight. And his only flaw is, like, there's a green light over there, and he starts to get a little wimpy. He doesn't fit that team. He's very different. And the truth is that our team is very different. There are people who don't fit into our mode of operating. There are people who can't accept a certain level of technical debt in the code that they write in order to deliver business value. That really bothers them. And I completely sympathize with them, but it's not a fit for our team. And so we had to find what was the right way to interview to find the right people for our team. And there were a couple of key themes. One, we needed people who were flexible. We needed people who could deal with the fact that, like, yeah, we're gonna have to go quick and then come back and redo it and probably throw that away and go do something else. But we will have learned because we did that. We needed people with a unique sense of ownership. Everyone at Indeed is empowered with ownership in really the whole company, but especially in their individual project. And in the incubator, we're no different, but the ownership here is one where you need to be emotionally engaged in the product, providing new ideas, delivering your best product of your life in very short windows. And the moment it gets shut down, you're like, hey, I'm glad we learned all that, now let's go do this other thing. And that's not everybody. Some people, that shift really kind of breaks their brain, and that's totally okay. They're more consistent, and they're great for other teams. They don't always fit into our team. And so we had to figure out the right questions to ask to find out whether people would be a fit. The second thing that happened to us, and then we learned a ton from, is we had two projects. I mentioned our beta product, hiring events, and we had one other, and this was in April of 2017. By the end of 2017, by October, actually, not even at the end. By October 2017, we had 10 products in 4 offices, and I never stopped to count the time zones because I didn't want to know. We had teams here in Austin, we had teams in Seattle, we had teams in Tokyo, which is a lot of time zones to begin with, and then actually we had teams a team in Hyderabad, India as well. Now, circumstances kind of put that upon us as, hey, here's these great ideas, but they're going to be kind of spread around. Are you guys ready to take this on? And we said, well, those are really great ideas, and we think they would benefit from being in this program, but we're brand new at it. We'll try. And we tried, and honestly, we made some mistakes. It was hard to carry that many projects that quickly. It was hard to carry that many time zones that quickly. Truth is that I actually went from, over the course of just a few months, 8 direct reports to 17 direct reports across all 4 of those offices with no managers supporting me. And so I messed up and had to quickly get some leaders in to help me do this. I had to get some additional, more senior team members into the team because we had taken on a number of projects from our university program. And so we learned a lot, and ultimately, we have gotten better at giving autonomy to those other sites and making sure those sites have the ability to drive their product ideas forward. We ultimately did shut down the Hyderabad team only because we only had the one project there and needed to kind of coalesce a little bit around kind of really our core engineering sites. And we hope to expand back to the rest of the engineering sites over time because we think that there's a lot of value in unlocking all of the engineers that can do this and unlocking those ideas that can be successful. And then, the other thing I will say that we messed up is we start with a model where every project starts with 2 engineers and a product manager, and then as it has needs, it grows from there. We made the mistake of keep thinking, oh, these 2 engineers can do anything. It's great. And then all of a sudden, Hiring Events has millions of dollars of revenue and is being sold through the entire sales force of Indeed in a couple of other countries besides the US. And it's like, we're doing that with 2 engineers? It's great for margins, but wow, these folks are working really hard to make sure that around the clock the product is staying up, that all of the features that we need to get done to support our sales team and our client success team and our customers, that's a lot, that's spreading them very thin. And we inadvertently kept the teams too small for too long. And so now we've got a more clear process for when teams can and should ask for more engineers. And actually, I've gotten into the mode now of going proactively to teams and saying, I think you might need another engineer. What would you do if you had another engineer on the team? And then once you get their brain rolling, they come back and they ask for that engineer. But sometimes it takes prompting them to think, what would it take for you, or what would it look like if you had that other engineer, in order for them to kind of think, oh, that would have more breathing room. We could take on this thing, or we could provide more automation testing so that we had a better safety net. So there are a lot of benefits to kind of expanding the team within reason. So that ultimately our team's goals are to learn no matter what. Like that's what matters. The only failure that our teams have is a failure to learn, and we really work hard to make sure that they're always learning. But we've had a lot of successes too. And so thinking about those successes and thinking about what we learned from those successes, the first is we learned how to exit. We learned how to get out of a project, and this is really hard. A lot of organizations struggle with this. If a team sets a goal and then achieves that goal, for us, that doesn't mean it gets to continue. Sometimes that goal was wrong. Sometimes, you should have learned along the way, and you should have adjusted the goal, and it should have been higher, and there's more we could have learned. Sometimes they set the goal, and we learned along the way that there's a lot of risk here, and this is not a business that we want to be in. Sometimes our teams have actively chosen to say, hey, I don't actually want to go back to the investment committee and pitch for more funding. I want to go to the investment committee and tell them why we should not be doing this business anymore. That's a really mature decision for a team to get to the place where they can speak to that. And I love it when our teams do that, because it means that they're really thinking like business owners and saying, hey, this is not a risk, or this is not a market that's going to be successful. Let's move on to some other opportunity. So meeting the goal isn't necessarily a reason to continue. The goals can be wrong, and that's okay. We can adjust those goals as we go. Ultimately, we've set a couple of metrics that we think our teams are responsible for in terms of whether or not they get to continue. It comes down to, are they finding business alignment in whatever business they're building, and are they having surprisingly positive results? Those are the 2 big things that they give us an indication of whether or not that should continue. And I know that those are squishy, but it's because it depends on what you're doing and what your business is, what those things are, to judge whether or not we should continue. The next thing that I think was a very good thing that we did right, and I don't know that we knew we were doing it right from the beginning, but I had been part of startup teams for, like I said, 10 plus years before coming to Indeed. And I had seen labs teams, although I'd never been on a labs team. But one of the quintessential failures that happens among labs teams is that they build something and it's having some success. And then they look at the engineering team and they say, here, take this, it's working. We don't know what to do with it. And that handoff causes the product to fail, or it gets rejected by the host because it doesn't look like the rest of the product, or it doesn't serve the same metrics. And so we were able to build our labs innovation culture as an evolution of the overall Indeed engineering culture. So we were able to borrow principles. We were able to kind of rebrand some of the principles of simple, fast, comprehensive, and relevant that our general engineering team espouses as the core of the culture. And we were able to tie into those and say, you know what, we're not going to be countercultural. We're going to build products that move your team's metric. And when we do, you're going to want what we did because it's going to help your team be more successful, whether it's moving NPS or it's moving number of job seekers or employers or whatever your team's core metric is. We're going to help to move that, and we're going to show you that, and we're going to be aligned with you on that so that you want this product. And actually, we hold our products with open hands and have other teams come and take them from us. And it's been very successful in allowing us to transfer ideas and products and projects and teams out into the core business and see them continue to be successful. And lastly, from the things that we've learned, ultimately, Bruce Wayne has all that money, and he's able to have all these bat gadgets and kind of throw batarangs like they're candy. And to some extent, that budget is there for the team on purpose. We wanted to give them some flexible budget. And so when they get that double down, we really encourage them to think, what should they do with that money? We will say the phrase, and I know this sounds a little flippant, but if money can make a problem go away, and of course this is within their restricted budget, they should do that. Because if the money can make that problem go away, then they can use their team and their time to go work on something else. And so we've used a CDN for a couple of years. Lots of companies use CDNs. We happen to use one that not only will host the images, but actually comes with a really slick little widget that we had to compromise a little bit on how that widget would look, but it would allow us to do uploads of things directly from the user into the CDN. And we didn't have to build all of the file upload, file storage, file transfer to S3. We get to skip all of those steps and just say, hey, here's some money. We'll take your widget and your CDN. Thank you very much. And it comes with image manipulation and time to live caching and all kinds of great benefits. So we can build some really cool little products using that CDN, and a lot of it's really, really simple and straightforward for us. Another example, we use Amazon Web Services to speed us up. So it could be that we use S3 for storage instead of having to build out a large file system locally. Or the more common examples, we use Amazon services to protect our core. Because we are rapidly iterating and doing some things that are pushing the boundaries of what Indeed has traditionally done, we want to be really protective of that core, so we'll put it in a completely separate network, one that's really not very connected to the rest of Indeed in order to make sure that it's safe. So, when we're building web crawlers and we're looking for information about different jobs or different opportunities, we do that in a completely separate and protected space. And that, by having a separate contract, separate, network that really doesn't call into our internal network, it protects, the rest of Indeed from any sort of danger that could happen as we did that. So with that, we're really just getting started. We're almost 3 years into this. We've learned a ton. It's been an absolute ton of fun along the way, and I'm happy to answer any questions I can, but thank you all so much for coming tonight.